New England 100 years ago. Spring. Oak leaves big as a squirrel's foot. Indian corn planted the seed for a new economy and a new order. Hence the home place, the citadel of that new order. For out of that new economy, thus grounded in the culture of maize, arises the American farmstead, stronghold of human liberty. At first, no doubt, it was a frail and pitiable little fortress. We are not even sure as to its structure, but it was probably wattles and daub, like the poorest hovels of old England of that day, and thatched with bark or brush, or perhaps with reeds or even corn stalks. Its chimney, we suspect, was made of sticks and clay. It was a makeshift, its clay chinking ill-suited to meet the rigors of the New England winter, but it served its purpose. Soon this hovel is supplanted by a real house. The frame is of heavy-hewn timber. The chimney girt, the summer beam. Presently, we have a farmhouse that is a fortress indeed, the early American New England home. Framed with heavy oak and weather-bordered with clear white pine, in appearance almost identical with frame houses still standing in old Essex and Middlesex, many of these early New England farmhouses have stood staunch for over 300 years. In the Plymouth area, several fine examples of early construction remain. This house, built by William Harlow, is exceptionally well preserved. Note the gambrel roof. The building now called the Harlow House was built by William Harlow a little later. The John Bradford House, built in 1675 at Kingston, Massachusetts. Oldest frame house in America, and family at Dedham, Massachusetts. The present rambling structure is the result of several additions to the original house. A salt box house, a type peculiar to very common. Salient feature of the early New England farmhouse was a chimney stack, at the base of which is the great hearth. The hearth, source of warmth and cheer throughout the cold northern winter. Altar of the comforting and savory domestic rites, where the bean porridge was cooked, the haunch of venison roasted, the pone of Indian meal baked. Focus of the home life of the pioneer household, perennial wellspring of inspiration for song and story, the hearth, as sublimated in the New England tradition, remains the symbol of all that is wholesome and fundamental in our civilization, so deeply impressed on the American mind that in these days, when the standard of living is measured in kilowatts, no flimsy bungalow is complete without its small and smoky imitation of some 200-year-old fireplace, no penthouse fully equipped without its little cast-iron copy of this hickory backlog. The structure girt about this glamorous hearth was and is the New England home place. It stands 4 square to the earth, an example of honest workmanship, plain yet beautiful in its austere simplicity. A strong fortress wrought out of the fruits of a stony and recalcitrant soil by painstaking and frugal husbandry. Wrought is the word, and bear in mind that wrought, now, just as it was then, is the past participle of the good old verb, to work. Another shore, a warmer strand, other crops, other customs, provincial Maryland, home of religious freedom. Tobacco, golden staple of the Chesapeake necks. From these same fields where the Maryland farmer of our own day harvests his crop, hogsheads of the leaf rumble down the rolling roads to Annapolis, to Port Tobacco, to old Bladensburg, once busiest of Potomac landings. This is Bostwick, 1746, provincial seat of the Lowndes family, overlooking the battlefield of Bladensburg. Note the unique buttress. At first, these homes were austere and unadorned, like this very old farmhouse on the eastern shore of Maryland. This is Hamden, also on the eastern shore, one of the oldest brick houses in America, built by Thomas Martin in 1663. The climate here is mild, so the chimneys are placed at the gable ends of the house. In the older frame houses, the chimney above the fireplace stood away from the wall. The older small dwellings are distinguished by a characteristic box eave enclosing the overhanging ends of cross beams. A 17th century frame house with brick ends, known locally as a brick ender. Another example of the very early Maryland brick farmhouse, Clifton, built in 1735. With the advent of the Georgian style about 1720, there rose along both shores of the Chesapeake, in Virginia as well as in Maryland, a succession of magnificent rural homes that for chaste beauty, dignity, balance, and charm have not been surpassed since in this country, if indeed anywhere in the world. Scores of these 18th century farmhouses still stand to shame the 19th century architects and jigsaw fiddlers who have since defaced the American scene. Survivals of another age, of a mode of living as irretrievable as that of the Hesperides, these lovely Georgian and pre-Georgian houses of the Chesapeake are a precious architectural heritage. Fortunately, many of them have fallen into the hands of persons who realize their historical significance. Tulip Hill, seen here, is one of the most carefully preserved of the Cavalier mansions. It was built in 1745. Riverdale, near Bladensburg. This was one of the seats of the Calvert family. LaGrange, near La Plata, Maryland, is a glorified brick ender. This house was built by Dr. Craik, General Washington's family physician. His lordship's kindness, gift of the Earl of Shrewsbury to young Henry Darnell and his bride, Anne Talbot. The Pigeon House, an architectural oddity. Woodlawn, near Mount Vernon in Virginia, General Washington's wedding gift to Nellie Custis. Rossburg Inn, 1798, recently restored by the University of Maryland, a splendid example of the architecture of its period. Monticello, home of the American farmer who was also an architect, the designer of this now historic shrine and author of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson. Home of that other Virginia farmer who is first in the hearts of his countrymen, Mount Vernon on the Potomac. From this hallowed ground, General Washington rode away on many a mission of historic significance. Needless to say, this Virginia farmhouse will be preserved as long as the Republic stands. While Cavaliers were building along the coastline, less opulent pioneers were occupying the Piedmont country, the Shenandoah, the Brandywine, the Susquehanna Valley, the hills of New Jersey and New York. In In the foothills of the Blue Ridge in Virginia rose such farmhouses as this. The two-chimney house with long front porch, the prototype of the most widely distributed and perhaps most truly indigenous type of American farmhouse. House in Loudoun County, Virginia, perhaps 150 years old, but as good as when it was new. Meanwhile, farther north, immigrants from the Low Countries created an important contribution to the domestic architecture of the world, the Dutch colonial house. Apparently, unlike anything known before in the Old World, this quaint and lovely type is singularly satisfying to the lover of the unpretentious and homelike in domestic architecture. Note the characteristic and graceful curve of the roof as it slopes to the projecting eaves. Called Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouse, built by Moravians and other immigrants from Bohemia and Germany, is the center of the typical Pennsylvania farmstead, perhaps as substantial and as well integrated as any farm plant to be found anywhere. The walled manure yard is a characteristic feature. These solid and beautiful Pennsylvania and northern Maryland houses were built for keeps. The walls are massive. The masonry was laid by men who took pride in their work. With due care, such a house should stand for 1,000 years. All this built and maintained to our own day from wheat and corn and timothy, the old fundamental rotation used in a conservative and exceptionally skillful husbandry. From wheat and corn and timothy hay and hard work. It took more than 150 years for the tide of settlement to creep from the coastal plain to the crest of the Allegheny Mountains. In the next century, the pioneers swept 3,000 miles farther. And wherever the pioneer went, in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, his first permanent home was modeled after a Scandinavian type that Swedish settlers brought to New Jersey. Thus, to millions of folk in the highlands and the Central Valley, the old home place, now mostly a mere memory, is the log cabin built of horizontal logs, a type practically unknown to the very early English settlers. Abraham Lincoln was born in a one-room cabin like this, the prototype of all the early settlement homes in the Midlands. Thence developed the double log cabin, the mansion of the frontier, and thence in due time a whole brood of frame houses that even to this day are home to millions of Americans. 2 chimneys, center hall, long front porch, Thousands of houses like this still stand in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri. Sometimes the log cabin goes big house, like this old farmhouse in the mountains of Georgia. More often it survives as the home of the Highlander or of the Negro sharecropper. A humble home, but still a home that has its points. This evergreen bush in the yard, this, folks, is the Cape Jasmine. And these, to all intents and purposes, are the equivalent of gardenias that sell for $5 a dozen on Fifth Avenue. In 1796, 2,400 years after the Parthenon was built at Athens, Benjamin Latrobe came to America and became the founder of the Greek Revival. Hence the home place with a pediment harking all the way to the Acropolis. Witness Arlington, the Lee Mansion, once the home of General Robert E. Lee. Hence home places in the classic style, like the old Linear House at Madison, Indiana, which authorities have called the finest example of this type in the North. The Hermitage, built by General Andrew Jackson in 1835 near Nashville. Too monumental to be altogether home-like, these old pillared houses at least have dignity and a certain austere charm. While many of the less pretentious Greek Revival farmhouses are attractive and comfortable homes. Note this house near Cazenovia, New York, with its broad white pine architrave and its very formal portico. Southern Michigan. Central Ohio. These houses were built mostly of clear white pine. They will last. They represent a distinctive and pleasing type, an asset to the American scene, and should be preserved. In the South, especially in Louisiana, the Greek Revival flowered into its most splendid manifestation. Here, out of sugar cane and cotton, was wrought a type of plantation home in its own way as splendid as the Maryland or Virginia manor house. Witness Oak Alley with its long avenue of venerable live oaks. Here we have the Greek Revival happily exemplified in a structure massive enough to justify its heavy pillars. This mansion has been cherished and preserved, but some have not. Built during that same year in which Oak Alley was built, in the same style, also with 28 Doric pillars and galleries above and below, flanked by beautiful twin pigeonnières, now like the mansion itself falling into irretrievable ruin, Uncle Sam Plantation House is one of the saddest sights to be seen between Cairo and the sea, for it is doomed. Presently the levee will be moved back. Then the next great flood will sweep the mansion down the river. Far older than the showy mansions of the golden era of the 30s and 40s, and far more home-like, is the colonial Creole house built by the early Spanish and French settlers of Louisiana. Note the simplicity and dignity of this old home in the Acadian country. Another typical Acadian farmhouse. This is the home of Louis Arsenault, the Gabriel of Longfellow's Evangeline. A larger house of this attractive type near Houma, Louisiana. Many of the early Creole homes were essentially manor houses, the seats of owners of vast plantations. This is a melancholy example of such a home in the final stages of decay. Note the characteristic construction. Thus, a historic home of singular beauty and charm that somebody built with diligence and pride is left to molder to dust. In the high, arid country of the far west, we find a house that is far older than colonization. The simple and beautiful Pueblo type, which has come down to us from the Aborigines of the Southwest. A house admirably designed to serve its purpose in that region. A home place well worthy of the name. Over the Sierras is another home place of peculiar charm and fitness, the Spanish hacienda. Rancho Margarita near San Diego, an exceptionally well-preserved example of this type. Rancho Santa Fe, a smaller house of the Spanish period, also very well preserved. The mission of Capistrano happily exemplifies this beautiful style of architecture, a style that would, of course, be wholly out of place in a colder climate. And so we reach the Pacific, having seen the home place in its strictly material aspect. Now let's go back and look deeper, counting the cost and trying to weigh the spiritual significance of this old home place of ours. We look into the past, and wherever we look, we see folks working. Men trapping fox and marten. Men and boys clearing land. Men riving shingles. Men plowing. Women and girls carding and spinning wool. Boys trapping muskrats. Men harvesting wheat. Threshing with flail. Women drying pumpkin leather. Boys and girls picking berries. Women making apple butter. Bleaching lye and making soap. Men fighting over water holes. Trailing cattle. Herding sheep. Working to build and maintain the home place. Working early and late, 10, 12, 16 hours a day when the need arose. And a bewildering variety of tasks. Some easy and pleasant, some merely hard, many grueling and exhausting, but all taken together astonishingly important. We would all starve in short order if these jobs were left undone for long, but they are always done year in and year out, always for poor pay in terms of cold cash, and too often without benefit of many blessings of civilization dear to human hearts. No kitchenette, no Murphy bed, no delicatessen, no garbage man, no street piano, no fire escape, no steam laundry, no chlorinated Croton water, no spiffy tiled bath, no cabaret, no cocktail lounge, no penthouse. No penthouse. No penthouse. But mark that the home place is the prototype of all penthouses, the pattern of all those wistful-looking imitation home places city folks build among the chimney pots. And though it lacks some of the sprightlier blessings of urbanity, the home place does have certain advantages as a fixed place of abode for human beings. For example, a garden. You can't do this in a window box. The air that circulates here, wholly unconditioned though it be, is definitely sweeter to the human nostril than the air that blankets any place served by the garbage man. The smokehouse, considering the magic that may be wrought with hickory smoke, is not a bad offset for lack of a penthouse. Not bad. And don't forget the spring. Beyond question, the spring provides something far cooler and more palatable than any chlorinated city water. Too bad somebody has to tote it. It's admittedly an old-fashioned place, down to the earth advantage that no steam-heated hole in a high brick wall can ever have. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we give you the home place. This mountain farmstead and all the other American farmsteads from sea to sea. The home place, fixed place of abode of the American farm family, and by far the most important of American institutions. Make no mistake about this. Whether built of mud and straw or of bricks in Flemish bond, the home place remains the citadel of our liberties. For the folks who have built the home place and who live there are the bedrock of our national structure, the social ballast that is our surest safeguard against the triumph of any tyranny on our shores. And let's make no mistake either about the importance of the home place as an institution or about its cost. For its cost, admittedly, has been very great. From now on, its maintenance is likely to be a tougher job than we thought. Bear in mind that the home place is not obtainable through any grant or dispensation, that it is something you cannot buy with money. No, you cannot buy the home place. The home place must be created. It must be wrought. It must be won by unstinted individual expenditure of sweat and elbow grease, sometimes of blood. It must be maintained from generation to generation by unremitting individual endeavor and sacrifice. And therein lies its profound significance, its incalculable worth. The home place is priceless because it has been paid for by such lavish outlay of sweat and blood. In a word, by work. In the final reckoning, nothing gained in any other way is worth anything at all.